Welcome to episode 6 of the Multinational Money Podcast.
Welcome to the Multinational Money Podcast. I'm Johnny, your host, and if you're interested in expat life, achieving financial freedom, and making the most of global opportunities, then this is your podcast. Today, I'm joined by Josh from Expats Everywhere. He and his wife, Kalie, are originally from the US, but have lived in 4 different countries overseas and have now settled in Portugal. So in today's episode, we're going to talk a little bit about their journey, how they ended up moving abroad, living in different countries. We're going to talk about each of the different countries they've lived in. We're going to talk about how they came to choose Portugal as their final destination, essentially. And we're also going to talk about how their life is as remote workers and what is the difference between a remote worker and a digital nomad. So with that said, let's get right into the episode. Okay, Josh from Expats Everywhere, welcome to the Multinational Money Podcast.
Johnny, thanks for having us on.
It's a pleasure. I've watched some of your videos. I'm very familiar with you guys. You must be like one of the biggest channels in kind of the expat, maybe finance, moving abroad kind of space at the size you are, which is really cool. And it's definitely something I aspire to get to at some point on YouTube as well. So
thanks, man.
Yeah.
You're on your way for sure.
Thanks. Yeah, it's a real privilege, honestly. So let's get right into it then. So you obviously run Expats Everywhere with your wife, Kalie. Tell us a little bit about where you guys are from, kind of your professional backgrounds, and then how Expats Everywhere has come to be.
Yeah, definitely. So my wife and I are from the US, different states. We met each other in college. Both of us had kind of different career paths that we were about to take. But essentially, I took a trip abroad, fell in love with traveling and the idea of living abroad. And the path of least resistance, at least at that time, was teaching, namely doing ESL work. So I got into that. I got accepted to a university in Madrid to do a teaching it was a master's in education. And a part of that was to teach in a school. So I got my experience there and really enjoyed teaching. Basically spent the next 10 years teaching abroad. And Kalie spent 2 years living in Spain with a Spanish family as an au pair. So she was taking care of a 6-month-old at the time. This girl is now a teenager. It blows our mind. Like we saw her last November. It was amazing. We've kept in touch actually with that family. But after 2 years in Spain, we moved, and Kalie then got certified to become a teacher as well.
Cool.
Yeah.
Nice. And so are you guys still doing any teaching work today, or is it mainly Expats Everywhere that's providing your living?
Yeah, in 2020, I guess it was really 2019, we decided to burn the ships. We saw that our channel was getting to a size where if we really made another push, that we would be able to at least replace one of our incomes and kind of have that financial stability from the channel and the things that we have around the channel. Because it's not just, YouTube ads that pays, and that pays very little. But we were able to kind of see a pathway whereby if we put some more hours into it, that it could replace one of our incomes. And very quickly, that the hours kind of added up, and it was like, okay, both of us need to really go full-time on this. And we can dive more into that and kind of the finances of that if you want. But that was 2019 where we made the decision, and it didn't happen until 2020. And then in 2021, kind of during COVID and people looking into moving to Portugal specifically, is when the channel really took off, and we solidified an audience that was mainly interested in moving to Portugal.
Yeah, a lot of your recent content is primarily focused on Portugal. You got a lot of helpful resources. You've got a Portugal dedicated podcast as well. It's
yeah.
Remind me of the name. Is it Let's Move or Let's Talk Portugal?
Let's Get Moving. So
so
it's Expats Everywhere presents Let's Get Moving. Let's Move to Portugal is what it is. Let's Move to Portugal.
Yeah, perfect. So anybody listening looking for advice, tips about Portugal, you know where to go now.
Yep.
Great. And the idea itself of Expats Everywhere, where did that come from? Because I guess, was it the idea of just documenting your experiences of living abroad, and then it evolved into something bigger in that sense?
Yeah. So it was not about documenting our experience at all, actually. So essentially the idea came when we were living in Saudi Arabia. And if anybody has lived there, they know this to be quite true, whereby, or at least maybe before things became a bit more liberal there, the compound life can be quite boring. So if you don't find a hobby or you don't do something beneficial with your time, people tend to do things that are destructive with their time. So Kalie and I were looking at where next, and we had taken a trip to Singapore, and this was like maybe 6-7 months after we arrived in Saudi, and we fell in love with Singapore and decided that's the next place. And then we started doing the whole like immigration thing, looking at like what it would take to move. And it was just like, my gosh, this is ridiculous. Like we just did this. I would pay somebody to do this. And then the light bulb went off. It's like, well, if I would pay someone to do this, maybe someone would pay me. So we started Expats Everywhere as a consultancy to show people how to move abroad and like what steps need to be taken. And the YouTube channel was essentially going to be a marketing funnel for the consulting business to try to get clients. But we found out very quickly, we found out that we were terrible at YouTube. We knew nothing. We made shocking videos. We've kept a lot of them up. So if anybody wants to go back and laugh at us, please feel free. But they're not very watchable. But essentially, we just recorded other people and asked them and interviewed them about their experience living in a variety of countries. And you know what we found in that is we got really interested in hearing other people's stories and trying to improve our quality. And that's when we decided we would rather do the whole YouTube thing than doing the consultancy. So it wasn't really until maybe 2019 or so when we started to really dig in on YouTube and try to improve it, buying better gear, learning how to do video and sound better, getting better editing software and stuff like that. But yeah, that was the catalyst. But it all started with a consultancy that we had the bright idea that YouTube was going to be lead gen for us.
Yeah. Nice. And now your channel is at almost 70,000, above 70,000 subscribers, and you got some fantastic quality content on it now. So it's all part of the journey, isn't it?
Thanks, man. Yeah, absolutely. And it's definitely a journey.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, in my case, I've talked about it before. Like I started as pure personal finance, and then I did 1 or 2 Spain videos, and did a couple of collaborations on, another channel where we talked about Spain. And quickly I realized, maybe people are interested in what I want to hear about Spain. And so I slid into that niche somewhere in the middle of personal finance and Spain, and I've kind of found the sweet spot now. Yeah.
Good. Yeah, that's good.
So Josh, you and Kalie consider yourselves remote workers rather than digital nomads. It's something that we, discussed in our initial email exchange as well. And I thought this is a really interesting point to discuss as well, because I think people hear the term digital nomad or remote worker and they think, it's someone who bounces around from place to place very frequently. But there are people who like this, I think it's been dubbed slow madding in a sense as well, where you stay in one place for a few years. And I think that reflects your approach. So how did you decide on that approach, and how has it been for you? And why would you choose it over like a digital nomad, frequently moving around lifestyle?
Yep. Okay. So I'll give a little context to kind of occupationally how Kalie and I have been over the past 15 years of living abroad. Everywhere we've lived, we've had work contracts up until when we moved to Portugal. And when we moved to Portugal, both of us had remote jobs. Both of our jobs were remote before COVID hit. So we were already kind of used to the rhythm of life of like working from home, working digitally, remotely, not going into an office. And it was like we didn't skip a beat whenever COVID happened in terms of work-wise. We differentiate what a remote worker is and a digital nomad is from an immigration standpoint, whereby a remote worker would need to go through some sort of immigration process and get a visa. They don't have to go into an office. They work remote from, whatever, either state, city, country, whatever. A digital nomad to us is generally someone who stays less than their visa time allows. So we've started to see digital nomad visas pop up, but a lot of the early digital nomads were staying for 90 to 180 days, depending on what country it is. in a place, and then they would go to the next place. So it's like they were hopping around from kind of cheap destination to cheap destination, or chasing the sun, chasing summer instead of being in a winter climate, whatever it was. But essentially they didn't have a home base. They had a base for 90 to 180 days, and then they switched it up. So for us, our base is Porto, Portugal, and that's where we live. We work remotely for a U.S. company that is Expats Everywhere, and that's kind of it.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a good point about the digital nomad visas as well, because there are people who just, maybe they come to Europe and before 90 days is up, they head back to their home country. Or maybe they do take, one of these digital nomad visas. But I think despite the fact that they're called digital nomad visas, the time frame, the duration of the visa is typically a year, with the idea of trying to attract someone to the country for that length of time and maybe to get them to stay longer. So,
yes.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting development, though. Definitely.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
And I think early days in terms of digital nomads, it was like an exciting kind of lifestyle. And I think over time we've seen two things that have happened. One, the community has gotten kind of a bad reputation for being users. And then the other thing is like users and not integrators into society, the local community. And the other thing is that they tend to not pay for services, and they try to live like very, very economically. I mean, you see the types of people that go to Bali and Thailand, and maybe one of the main draws for there, not just the sun and, the tropical environment, but it's the low cost of living. Whereas remote workers that we see, they tend to go anywhere, especially Americans, using their jobs, like full high salary jobs, not working as maybe freelancers or startup entrepreneurs. So yeah, there's a big contrast in terms of what the communities are like. And obviously you don't want to paint anyone into a corner, but I think the digital nomad community kind of has in a way. And I hope that they shake that for sure.
Yeah, this is a really good point of conversation as well, because it's a lifestyle that I think is very attractive. And I think definitely if someone is thinking about giving it a go, I would say, why not? But at the same time, there is the social responsibility element that hasn't really been addressed. And somehow, whether it's governments and even digital nomads themselves need to maybe think about,
yes,
okay, how can we have this lifestyle without being detrimental to local populations?
Yeah. And a third thing is the mental aspect of it. I mean, you see a lot more creators that are in kind of the digital nomad community talk about mental health and, going that route, because it can be lonely. It could be almost like too much of a party lifestyle where you don't have stability, and it's draining, or changing addresses every 90 days. It can be draining.
Yeah.
Long term.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've been in Spain now for 4 years, and it's the first time I've been like in one place for, more than maybe a year and a half, 2 years at a time. And, like the experience of moving around, it's fun, but it is stressful. And I think at a certain time, like having a home base, is the way you describe Porto for you and Kalie, I think is good to have. Even if you are spending part of the year traveling, just having somewhere where you could say, this is my home base. Yeah, I think it gives you some kind of mental relief in that sense.
100%.
Yeah. So, having lived in multiple countries, and as you described it, being drawn to that lifestyle abroad, what are some of the things that's allowed you to do? Some of the experiences you've been able to have, some of the daily benefits that you experience that you wouldn't necessarily be able to enjoy back in the US?
Oof, that's rough. I mean, it's hard because I could go in many different directions. Very surfacey, I would say the exposure to different foods, languages, and cultures has had a massive impact on me. Certainly my palate is like ridiculously big now. Willing to try basically anything. Like you could put me in Cambodia and ask me to eat a spider, and I would. I'd try that out. I have.
Wow.
Let's see. in terms of like the language aspect of it, language and culture aspect of it, being confronted with so many different languages and cultures and ways of life has really helped me reflect on my own culture more, understand my own language more, and how we as Americans anyways communicate, or as English speakers, how we communicate. There's certainly a rhythm that makes sense culturally for us, the niceties, the salutations and all that stuff. Sometimes it exists in other languages, sometimes it doesn't. How does it make you feel? Like being aware of that stuff, because to some cultures it's not rude that if you don't greet them and you just jump in straight away. It's just been a massive learning experience that I could not have had I not moved abroad. And I don't think that travel really gives it to you. Travel can give you a taste of it, no pun intended, but it can't give you the full picture because you're not immersed in that place for long enough to really be confronted with differences.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like I traveled to Turkey and Georgia last year and I got phrase books, but because they were travel experiences, as much as I would have liked to and as much as I love languages, I didn't really end up using them. But because I've lived in Spain and whilst I lived in France, I definitely made it an effort to learn the languages. Yeah. And it's like shaped, even the way I speak in English now is like so different to when I left the UK for the first time, because hearing expressions, hearing ways of speaking in different languages. I think I speak a little bit more directly than I used to. My sentence structure sometimes is a bit of a mess. If I get used to speaking Spanish for long enough and then I end up trying to make the same sentence in English. But yeah, it's really funny how living abroad does impact you like that.
It's crazy how that happens, actually. Like I remember Spain was the first country that Kalie and I lived abroad, and I remember starting to learn Spanish and speak it more. And then I would try to have a conversation in English and it would just be so choppy. And it was even more so because I was doing a lot of auto-correcting from thinking about, okay, my job is essentially to teach English as a foreign language. And I would start to pick up on the mistakes that I would naturally make in my speech, right? And then I would just be auto-correcting and it would just be this real choppy sentence or phrase that I would put together. It was wicked. But I think I've gotten a little better at it now.
Yeah, that's good. But sometimes when I speak to like native English speakers again, like I sometimes think like they must listen to me and think like, what's going on with this guy? Why is he speaking like this? Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, it's funny. Anything else to mention for experiences or things that you wouldn't necessarily be able to have in the US?
Well, I mean, certainly the travel experiences, like the reality is the U.S. is huge and we have just about every type of topography someone could want. Certainly in the 50 states, not just the continental U.S., but I think it's a mixture of like visiting a foreign country, experiencing the culture, the food, the language, and kind of getting it all wrapped together, not just the topography, that makes, exploring the world really cool. And I couldn't have done that without leaving the U.S. And basing myself in different parts of the world and then traveling out from there. That's been really a motivating factor for Kalie and I to choose the places that we've chosen.
Yeah. Nice.
And long may it continue.
Yes, I hope so for you both as well.
Thank you. Now we're showing our daughter it. So our daughter's 4 and we're having a good time showing her the world and, taking a look at her passport. And it's like, all right, what stamp are we going to get now? Not that you get stamps in Europe, but you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. This is actually maybe a nice lead into the next question, which is what are some of the challenges that you faced in adapting into other countries? And I imagine it might be a bit more challenging for a family of 3 in your case than for like an individual traveler.
Okay. So initially focusing in on Spain specifically, 1, it was our first time abroad. And 2, our living situation was a little different because we were moving at the same time, but we weren't married yet. My wife was going to be, my girlfriend at the time was going to be living with a Spanish family outside of the city center. I was going to be in Madrid. I had to get roommates. So I kind of had to do the whole like college thing all over again. That was actually not as bad as I thought it was going to be. But the culture in Spain is quite different than the U.S. Some people might disagree with me. I mean, certainly if they grew up maybe in a more Latin American influenced area, but it's definitely different to me than the U.S. The eating times were different. The way of speaking is different. Walking on the sidewalk is different. I mean, like so many times I would just get run over. And I'm from a small town in the South, and like we're very polite. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. And you would like let someone walk by if like you wouldn't want to bump into them or touch them. I wasn't used to the city at all, so that also had a its part to play. But Spain felt like a very aggressive. Madrid felt like a very aggressive culture. So that played its part. Then moving to Asia and South Korea, where literally we were dropped off in a part of Busan, South Korea, 5 million people in the city, dropped off in an area of the city that had no metro connection. It was just buses in and out on top of a hill. And we could have been in a village. Like it kind of felt that way, except there were skyscrapers, huge residential buildings around us. Every single thing was in Korean. And we knew no Korean at this point. So everything felt so foreign. The smells felt foreign or were foreign. The sights, obviously. It was tough. I mean, it was very challenging not being able to read what things were. I mean, you would go in and you would see a white liquid in the grocery store and you just assume it's milk. But it's like you didn't know until you bought it and you sampled it. It's obviously changed, and you can definitely in the city center, you can definitely get by with pictures and like figure things out that way. But where we were specifically, it was tough. It was very tough.
Yeah. I think that's probably when you get like the real authentic experience of where you're living, not just living in like a big city center where you really got some kind of immersion and you're in the local culture. You have to, it forces you to integrate, and it gives you that full on experience that a lot of people are looking for, but maybe don't necessarily get sometimes.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, for us, it was like after Spain, South Korea, and Saudi Arabia, those three kind of back to back, all very different. Nothing has really surprised us about our other two moves. So when people ask us like, what's the most shocking thing about Portugal? It's really difficult for us to answer because it's like, we've seen it all at this point, basically,
Yeah, you gain a certain sense of adaptability to different cultures, and it makes the next one easier and more straightforward. Yeah,
for sure. I mean, maybe there would be things that we would be confronted with in South America, for example, that would catch us off guard if we lived in a remote village there, or Africa. But yeah, I mean, in general, it's like we've seen it.
Yeah. So this next one, particularly relevant for American listeners and citizens. How important is tax planning when you move abroad? And I guess maybe hasn't played so much of a role in choosing where you've gone, since you've gone with work contracts. But I guess for some people it may play a role. So how much has it played a role for you guys, and how important has proper tax planning been as US citizens?
Well, number one, I think the biggest misconception that we've got to cut through right now is that as an American citizen, you have to file taxes. There's an obligation to do that. The only way to not have to file taxes is renounce your citizenship and pay that hefty, exit tax. So you have to file. It doesn't mean that you have to pay. And the biggest problem that we have seen with expats, and this is before we got into doing expat content creation and stuff, just friends of ours that we worked with, they literally would go 5-10 years without filing taxes. And that could definitely catch up with you. It's hard to dig out of that hole as well. Like you've got to pay an accountant or tax preparer, especially to dig you out of that hole. So you file. If depending on your contract situation, you might qualify for foreign earned income exclusion, and that's a pretty high threshold, I think, in terms of amount that you can claim as tax free while you're living abroad. And for us, tax planning has been, moving to Portugal has been an important component because when we arrived, we had to weigh up how would the special tax regime here in Portugal that existed at the time called the NHR, how would that benefit us versus some of the other tax regimes that we could use. There's something called the simplified tax regime. It doesn't really work for Portuguese people, but because like we're earning money from abroad, it works. Tax preparations, it's very important for Americans at minimum because the filing requirement. So you just have to know that you have to file, and depending on the type of income you have, you may or may not pay taxes in the U.S. So it's really important to talk to someone who knows taxes, knows expat taxes, because we actually, not to go into like super detail on this, but we had an investment group or have an investment group that invests in real estate, and 2 of our partners are in the US, 2 of us are abroad. And we spoke with the guy that we wanted to use as our tax representative for the company. And we said, have you ever filed taxes for people that live outside of the US, like Americans that live outside of the US? And he's like, no. And we're like, okay, thanks for your honesty. We don't feel comfortable with you doing our taxes. And he's like, I don't feel comfortable doing your taxes. You need to have someone that is specialized in that. So he wasn't just trying to get our business, and do you know what I mean? Yeah. So we allowed him to do our taxes for business purposes, but then we kept our taxes with the same expat tax specialist.
Yeah, that's very good of him. Yeah, for his honesty. Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciated it.
It's it's one thing is doing taxes in your home country, which already can be complicated, but yeah, it's a whole different kettle of fish when you're in a foreign country and you've got assets scattered around the world, income from different countries as well. It can get really messy, so it's definitely worth getting a specialist in those cases.
Yeah, and I like people that have an attitude of I'll figure it out, but I don't want to be the guinea pig. You know what I mean? Like it's like cool, go figure it out. But I also don't want to be the first one, because if you mess up, like it's on me. You know, it's not like Portugal, from what I've been told, is the tax preparers here. If they make a mistake on your taxes, it's also on them. Whereas in the States, it's not quite like that. So, yeah.
Yeah. And in Spain, the tax authorities here are very unforgiving as well. So
I've heard.
It right.
Yeah. We were hardly earning anything when we lived in Spain, so they wouldn't have come after us, and they wouldn't have gotten much either.
Yeah.
But we were tax-paying citizens, not citizens, but taxpayers.
Yeah. Nice. So now let's get to an interesting part of the discussion. So let's talk about the different places that you've lived. So you said first was Madrid, then you lived in South Korea, then Saudi Arabia, and finally now you're in Porto.
One other place before that, Singapore.
Yes, Singapore as well. Nice. So covered almost every corner of the earth, apart from, maybe Latin America and Africa. But very well traveled, and sure you have a whole lot of experiences from your time abroad. So walk us through a little bit of each of them. So we know a little bit about Madrid. So you went both as kind of ESL, well, you as an ESL teacher and Kalie as an au pair. Then to South Korea. So how was that experience?
South Korea was good. We had to wait, actually. We had a visa delay, so we had to wait in the U.S. for about 6 months to get our paperwork through, and then to get placed into the city we wanted to be in. Because we had just lived in Madrid, which, correct me if I'm wrong, it's like 5,000 in the 5 million in the metro area, more or less.
About that,
About that. So Seoul, South Korea, the capital, was like, 20 or something like that. It's like ridiculously large, mega city. And it's like, okay, we could move from one capital to another capital, but this other capital is like way bigger than something that we're familiar with and I think want to take on. But there's also this really cool 5 million inhabitant city by the water, so I had never lived by the beach before. Kalie grew up in Florida, so it was normal for her, but she wanted to do it again. And we moved there, sight unseen. Neither one of us had ever lived in Asia. And it was really being thrown in the deep end, to be honest. Like, you start work almost immediately. They've got a very serious work culture. In terms of like you can be on your deathbed, you can be deathly ill, they want you there. So strange, getting everyone else sick. But it's like they want you there just to like show your face that you're, you know, part of the collective. So that took some getting used to. I wouldn't say that in our positions we necessarily worked hard, but we saw the work ethic kind of the culture, the hours, the demand, and that started to wear a little thin. The language barrier was massive. We could read Korean, or like we started to read Korean and understand certainly the food, but having a conversation was quite difficult. Neither one of us took not only did we not take the time to learn Korean, we just didn't have enough time. The people that we saw being successful at learning Korean were almost always our single guy friends. Our single guy friends would get a Korean girlfriend, and it was like 6 months later, they were nearly fluent. I mean, it was like without a doubt, that was kind of the pattern. The single girls, they didn't tend to date the Korean guys. So they mainly stayed single, honestly, because all the foreign guys were dating the Korean girls, more or less. But, you know, after about a year and a half, we both knew it was time. It was time to move on, try something else. And that's when I started monetarily wanting to go to the next level. And that's when we saw that the Middle East was the place that we should go. Yeah. So shall I talk about Middle East a little bit?
Please, honestly, I like the Middle East is like one of the most fascinating places in the world for me. So I'm really curious to hear about your experience in Saudi.
Yeah. So one of the main drivers, besides the money aspect of it, but honestly, like hand on heart, one of the main drivers was I was really tired of having like irrational kind of fear of Middle Eastern looking people. You know, there have been several wars that America's been involved in the Middle East. Anytime we've had any sort of terrorism, it's been mainly involving people from the Middle East. So there's this image in Western media of what a Middle Easterner is. And I knew it couldn't be true. I really, really knew it couldn't be true. Like it didn't feel right. So I wanted to challenge that. And initially, Kalie and I had jobs in Dubai. A friend of ours in South Korea knew someone that had just started a school. It was going into its second year in Dubai. And we started going through the paperwork process. Kalie is very type A personality, very organized. And this school was not. And she's actually trained me to be more organized. I used to be a mess. Now I'm only slightly a mess. So they were not organized at all. And the visa seemed like it was just going to be a hassle. And it was like, if we're going to start off on this foot, what is it going to be like working for you on a daily basis? You know, that's going to just be rough and annoying. And we, you know, a couple months before we were supposed to go, we just like reneged on our contract basically. And we got back out into the job market. I made a connection with the director of a school or program in Saudi. And it was like 6 months later, we arrive in Dammam airport, and we're being picked up after a very long day of travel. It's dark out. We're being picked up at the airport. We see our name sitting on like a post essentially as we're walking out of customs immigration. And we're just like, that's us. And there's nobody that's claiming the sign. And we point to the sign and gesture to this guy. And this guy's telling us, like, basically pantomiming, your driver went to get a coffee or something. Like, he'll be back. So we stood there, and then we see this guy shuffle over in his sandals, and he, like, leads us away. We get in this busted up van, and we're just driving down an interstate or highway with, like, literally no lights on. He's got the headlights on, but there's no, like, overhead lights to light the path. 2 hours later, we arrive at our apartment. It's not great. And I'm just thinking, like, what did I drag my wife into? Like, what have I done? But I crash out. Little did I know, I find this out years later. She stayed up all night crying, like thinking, what have we done? But we wake up the next morning and we basically get thrown into work. Actually, Kalie gets thrown in more than I do, but they give us a book and they're like, start teaching. the the program that we taught for was probably the easiest job I've ever had in my life in terms of the rhythm and the demand and the work schedule. We worked 4.5 days a week. We worked 5 weeks and then got a week off, and then 5 more weeks and a week off. And every time there was a week off, everyone would just travel. Like, you basically you don't have anything to spend money on. Your flight in and out of the country is paid for. They've paid for your visa stuff. Your accommodation's paid for. Your utilities are paid for. You have a cheap phone, like SIM card phone plan. Food there is subsidized, or when we were there it was. I'm guessing it still is. So it's pretty cheap. Where we lived, it was difficult to get imported goods. So we're basically eating kind of the white label stuff at the grocery store, not name brand anything. It was great. I mean, like, our goal was to go there to pay off my master's degree from the US and pay down a home loan. And we did it, but the culture there in terms of like on a day-to-day basis, unfortunately, it was really difficult to interact with locals. Our main contact point for most of the people that we worked with, the main contact point was our students, which was cool, but also we didn't get to talk to the older generation.
Yeah. And I guess maybe you didn't get some deeper relationships as well, because I guess students, you see them in class time, you maybe converse with them a little bit outside, but apart from that, you don't see them as much,
Yeah, exactly. I mean, both of us had, in the year that we were there, both of us had one student each that we developed like a deeper relationship with, where we saw outside of class. They kind of showed us behind the curtain, if you will. They showed us, deeper into the culture, had deeper conversations. English levels, though, amongst Saudis were better than Korea for sure. At least the people that we came in contact with. Hospitality was great. The food was different for sure. It wasn't bad, but it was very different than I think what we're used to. But they do also have a lot of American food, a lot of fast food, very prevalent there. Their diet's not great. I mean, I think that's why sometimes you see some serious obesity issues the way, that we have in the US or the UK.
Okay. And out of curiosity, when was this that you were in Saudi?
Gosh, what year would it have been? 2015, I think. Oh man, it all blends together. I'm trying to think of when we went to the Brazil World Cup. That was 2014. And I think after the 2014 World Cup was our year in Saudi, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Because obviously, the country is now rebranding itself. It's in the process of kind of going through a Dubai style transformation, becoming, an open society, a more open society, at least with the 2030 vision. So I guess it has changed a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And we saw the front end of that change because we were there about 6 months in or so. The past king, he died, he passed away. And, everybody was abuzz about like what was going to happen next, because the next in line was always predicted to be more liberal and open the country up. And I think the younger generation was dying for it because they had influences from, American music and TV and movies and whatnot. And they're like, let's go, so, we got to see that. We knew that it was coming. We knew that it was not far away to have women driving, not again, but women driving for the first time, and movie theaters popping up and that type of thing. We did also have pretty deep respect for how devout they appear, at least outwardly, how devout the Muslims there appear. That was inspiring, seeing their dedication to prayer 5 times a day. It was interesting. It was a cool cultural experience. I wouldn't have traded it for the world. Kalie and I know that if for some reason we needed to go back to do another work contract, we could. We wouldn't be scared to at all. Actually, we'd be excited to visit again and see what the country is like and how it's changed. I think we'll do that if we can get some press passes to go.
Yeah.
We're working on it.
Nice.
Yeah.
So from Saudi was then to Singapore?
Yeah, Singapore is amazing. Singapore and Portugal for me are right up there with each other in terms of like favorite places to live. I think right now Singapore slightly edges it. And the main reason is because we had such a good community there. Like our work community and then our local like Singaporean friend community group, amazing. We haven't built that here in Portugal yet. Now we've been here for 4 years, 3.5 years. We were in Singapore for 4 years, and it only took us about a year to build what we built there. We don't have that here. We are in a different stage of life because we didn't have a kid there. We have a kid here. Yeah, Singapore food, amazing. Cost of living actually is not that bad if you're making a decent wage. Like we were teaching at an international school. It wasn't the top international school on the island by any stretch. I mean, it was like mid-tier, but we were still making well enough to save, have a really nice lifestyle, travel. Awesome. Love Singapore. Great hub for travel in Southeast Asia.
Yeah, it's on my list for Asia when I eventually get to travel out there. So
do it,
I
brother.
hope to go.
You got to do it. It's amazing.
Yeah. And then from Singapore, then to Portugal. So what led you to Portugal, and how has your experience in Portugal been?
I think Spain led us to Portugal. So whenever we lived in Madrid, Portugal was one of the first places that we traveled to because it's next door neighbor. Cheap flights back then, at least. Ryanair, EasyJet could get you over to Portugal for €9.99 or something. They would run those promotions all the time. So we would travel, quite often to Portugal, and it was really Porto that drew us. Like this city is like a magnet. It is such a magical city. Just the right size for us. We have realized that we've become second city people. We're no longer capital people. Capital cities are too big for us. We like the second cities, a little slower paced life. Portugal, whenever we traveled here from Spain, we realized that it was a slower paced life, even a step down from Spain. Spain's pretty chill too. But we just felt like one day we're going to live here. And little did we know, since we had first visited like 15 years ago, that some of the visas that came out gave Americans the opportunity to actually move fairly easily to Portugal. Whereas before, when we moved to Europe, it was quite easy as Americans moving to Spain, and there was almost no pathway for Americans like us in our occupation to move to Portugal. So we really made it happen, saw the opportunity, made it happen, and love it here. I think having a kid here is the key key change from the other places that we've lived. Because you kind of asked me that question at the beginning about that, having a kid. Having a kid was super easy here. Not that we had Valencia here, but like, you know what I mean? Like raising a kid in Portugal, super easy. Has probably made it easier, honestly, because the culture here, like if you have a kid in a shop or doing something bureaucratic, you can jump the queue. Like people will push you up front because they want to take care of families like that. And that's a beautiful thing, that there's not many places in the world that we see that happen. Singapore would have been great for kids as well. It is great for kids because of the safety aspect. Korea would have been rough. Saudi, in my opinion, would have been difficult. There would have been a lot of other logistical considerations that we would have had to take. Certainly transportation would have been more challenging in Saudi. But here in Portugal, I mean, we live in Porto, second biggest city, easy to walk basically everywhere. We can get her to school very easily. We can get her via public transportation or super affordable ride shares like Bolt and Uber. Food's inexpensive, relatively speaking. Housing's gone up, but even that is okay. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that Porto seems to be a well-connected city because Lisbon, I just have the impression that it's just the complete opposite. It's chaotic to get around. Like you can walk to places and it's nice, but it's very hilly. The public transportation, the metro is a bit limited, and just being in a taxi or an Uber or Bolt or whatever, you're going to be sat in traffic for a good part of the trip. Has been my experience of Lisbon, even though I like the city.
Yeah, I mean, certainly traveling on the roads at peak times is dangerous. Dangerous in that you might be sitting in traffic, just killing time.
Yeah.
But I don't rag on Lisbon necessarily for its public transportation though, or its walkability. It's much hillier than Porto. Porto, people say Porto's hilly. We've got a couple of hills, and they're mainly in the touristy areas. That's the thing. So when tourists come here, they're like, oh my gosh, it's all hills. But it's like, no, that's where all the sites are. Once you get out of there, then you hit several plateaus in the neighborhoods where people actually live, that it's like, that's your little 15-minute community that's just on a plane. So it's all good.
Yeah. Nice. Did you consider the Algarve at any point?
No.
Or was it just, purely Porto?
I think for us, the stigma of Algarve is it's for retirees and for tourists, like British, German, maybe some French tourists, and that just wasn't our thing. We're nowhere near retiring. We need a city with a bit of buzz. There's some places down in Algarve that are cool for sure, and they're worth a visit, and they're worth exploring for the right person. But for Kalie and I, it was always Porto.
Yeah. But you get a much more authentic Portuguese experience that way, I'm sure. And it's probably...
I think so. Yeah. Although we spend most of our working day in English, at home. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, similar for me. Like I work a lot of the time from home. Like I work in English primarily as well, and a lot of my content creation is in English. But when I step out into the street, like I know I'm in Spain, and I know that I've got to speak to someone in Spanish, and I can experience Spanish culture authentically. Yeah, it's one of the things I love about Madrid, though, is like it's maintains a perfect balance, in my opinion, of authentic Spanish culture but openness to people from outside of Madrid.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, what a journey you guys have been on. Anyway, that was awesome to hear about in terms of your journeys around the world, the different experiences you've had, the challenges and the positive aspects you've had. So awesome for sharing that. So you guys chose Portugal, and it was almost like, the place to be for the past 2 or 3 years. It was like, if you're a digital nomad, if you're looking to move to Europe, like Portugal, because of the, the tax benefits, the easy visas, like you said, to get there, or the visas with lower requirements, I should say. Obviously, a lot of that's changed starting last year and is now starting to take effect this year. Has that impacted you guys at all, or is it mainly impacted, new people that are looking to come to the country?
No, on a very personal level, it's not impacted us at all, except maybe you could say there's been a changeover in the immigration body that kind of controls all of the immigrants. So it went from an organization called CEF to one called IMA, and the handover has been very sloppy. That's caused issues because, for example, if you are living at one address and you change your address, you need to, I can't remember if it is 30 days or 90 days, you need to change your address with CEF, or now IMA, like you're required to. But to do that, you have to schedule an appointment and actually get the address changed in their system by going in and showing proofs. Well, they're so backed up, it is nigh impossible to get an appointment. And they're also at the same time trying to process new people coming in, trying to process people just renewing their residence permit. So it's like all of these things they're controlling. So to get something little done like having an address change on a residency card, it seems like something very small, but you're required to do it. So it puts you in this kind of tension, right? I don't want to be illegal, and that's the way many people feel. Kalie and I have had to do like small stuff like that, changes with CEF, before the changeover to IMA. But I mean, we obviously stay in communication with people that have to go through this stuff currently. Kalie does a lot more on keeping her ear to the ground on what's going on with the visa stuff. So she could talk more on that. Unfortunately, she's not here. But the changes that we've seen that have happened with the visas, really the biggest one was the split in the D7 visa. The D7 visa, when we moved, was called the retirement visa. However, in the fine print, it was basically being able to sustain yourself or live on your own financial means. Since, October of 2022 is when they announced the change was going to happen, and then it actually happened in November of that year. They've essentially created two paths. One is the D7, which is for passive income, and then there's the D8 for active income. So if we were immigrating now, we would have to do the D8, especially because we have gotten rid of some real estate, some income producing real estate, and divested. And we don't have those passive income sources. If that makes sense. So you have the D8 visa is for remote workers or digital nomads. And one side of the digital nomad is for a year or less. That's your stay, but it is renewable. I think it's renewable for 1 or 2 times. The long-term residency part of the D8 visa allows you, your first year or first renewal period is 2 years. And then after that, you get a 3 year. So it's almost the exact same. However, the income requirement is 4 times the minimum wage, which the current minimum wage is $8.20 compared to the D7, which is just minimum wage. Okay. So it's I don't know why it's 4X. It doesn't make sense to me that the D8 is 4X the D7, but I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's similar in Spain, what they've done with the non-lucrative visa, which is the D7 equivalent, and then the digital nomad visa, which is probably now the D8 equivalent or similar. Because, they're both about 4 times minimum wage in terms of income requirements as well. I think it's, trying to, because they've had such a large influx of foreigners coming into the country, they're trying to say, okay, we need to put the brakes on somehow. So let's up the thresholds and make it harder.
In a sense, I get that. I think the disconnect for me in terms of economics is that when you bring in people that are only making at least 4X, their purchasing power is so great. So, 4X of minimum wage here in Portugal is huge.
Yeah.
Everyone thinks that half the country or whatever is on minimum wage. It's not true. The stats show that about a fourth of the country is on minimum wage or thereabouts, but the median income is around $11.50, and that's 14 pay periods, not 12 pay periods.
Yeah.
But if you're talking about 4X of 820, now you're talking 3,200. I mean, that is 3X of what the median is. They become essentially, they come in and they're top 5%, top 10% earners.
Yeah.
It's crazy. So I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. I mean, maybe just, I don't know.
Yeah. It's a tough one. Yeah. As we said earlier.
Yeah. I don't envy the politicians for sure.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
It's not easy.
All right. So a conversation that I seem to be having a lot these days and that we're both looking forward to. So Spain versus Portugal. Discuss.
Yes. Yeah, man. It's tough for me because I've just recently realized that I think most of my feelings and thoughts about Spain are very inextricably tied to Madrid specifically. Kalie and I, when we lived in Spain, we traveled to just about every region, autonomous region of the country. The ones that we missed, we have picked up just recently in the past year. We were able to make it to Navarro and La Rioja. So I think those are the only ones that we had missed while living there, and then the islands, some of the islands. But the cultural differences from region to region can't be understated. And I think the differences are much greater than the differences you see in the different regions of Portugal. The diversity is greater, in my opinion. So that's where I start.
Yeah. Which one? It's probably tough to ask you which do you prefer, but you seem very happy in Portugal at least.
No, I prefer Portugal. That's easy. Yeah. Okay. Prefer Portugal. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. What's the reason? Why do you prefer Portugal?
I think maybe Madrid scarred me.
Okay.
I listen. I love the city of Madrid. I didn't love the people and the day-to-day interactions there. It felt very rushed and at times like inauthentic. I think maybe now going back with our daughter would shift things. Being a young family would shift things and allow people to, people would likely treat us differently. We were just there in November, and it's the third or fourth visit we've made since we've lived there. And every time I go, it seems like I catch a little bit different vibe, and it's better than the vibe I felt when I was in my mid-20s. So that's a good thing. But I think overall, like for me, Portugal hasn't changed very much, like in a positive way. It hasn't changed very much. The first impressions I had of like people being very friendly and helpful and warm and patient, I think that's the key thing, has existed. And every time I visited, it's always been there. And now that I'm living here and, seeing it on a day-to-day basis, it just hasn't changed my opinion of the city. Whereas I think oftentimes what happens when people move to a place, they have an idea in their mind, then they have an experience, and then over time, the experience changes. And then you want to stay or you want to go. And after a year and a half in Madrid, it was like, okay, it's time to go. After a year and a half in Korea, okay, it's time to go. After a year, 9 months in Saudi, okay, it's time to go. So I think that's kind of the thing. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a very fair assessment, I'd say as well. I think Madrid today, though, I made a video about this, is very different to Madrid when you were there. And even when I moved to Madrid, it's probably somewhere in the middle of what you experienced and what I experience now. Like since 2020, 2021, it's like the transformation is going through is like rapid. Like there's a lot of tourists coming to the city. There's now like, the Formula One, which will be here from 2026.
Yeah.
There's talks of like expanding the airport and the AVE network.
Yeah.
So, and then there's like a big, like CBD development in the works, like in the north of the city.
Nice.
So, I do side with you on the fact, though, that I think I'm also becoming like maybe not a second city person, but at least like a suburbs person. Like for me, being in the center of Madrid is like incredibly stressful, and I try to avoid it at all costs.
Yes.
I'm quite happy in my little town, like 30 minutes outside.
Oh, which town is it? If you can say it on air.
I won't say it on here, but it's to the east of Madrid. We'll say.
Okay. Yeah. So I used to live in like around Pavones. Kind of close to Vallecas, and and that felt a little more like a community.
Yeah, it's just that central district is just it's packed and it's very
rammed.
busy.
Yeah.
Even more so now with tourists. So
our first visit back actually after living there was in 2017, and we already saw a shift. We saw a shift in attitude towards English tourists, not English, but like English-speaking tourists. So that was helpful. Not because we struggled with our Spanish, but just some of the things we saw when we lived there were crazy. Like in terms of the way the Madrileños would interact with people that didn't speak Spanish. It's like, have a bit of patience here, or like work with them, hand signals or something, like, we've got some crazy stories with stuff that we saw, but yeah,
gosh, I'm sure. even today, I get the impression, and I only really see it like when my family come and visit, because as someone who speaks Spanish, like I don't have any problem communicating. But when my family come is when I realized that, there is still a bit of a language deficiency in maybe some of the tourist sectors where not everybody speaks English to a level that is, helpful with tourists. And I've had other people say this to me as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, the city is becoming more and more international and open, so maybe that will improve.
It is, it's super international. That's phenomenal, and it's a nice city, beautiful. A lot of parks, a lot of green spaces to not feel like you're just being crushed by concrete, and so it's cool.
Exactly. Yeah,
I do like that.
I say this to pretty much everyone. If Madrid had a beach, it would be wow,
Tops.
Top, absolute top. It's still, I think, is my favorite place in Spain and one of my favorite cities in the world. But if it had a beach, it would just be invincible.
I think that's why I like Valencia so much. I mean, Kalie and I like Valencia so much that we named our daughter Valencia. So,
wow.
That's a city for me that really has it all. The old city is super cool. The Science Arts District is phenomenal, especially if you can see it like an aerial drone view. Wow. And it's got a beach. So how can you beat that?
Yeah. My experience of Valencia was a less crowded Barcelona at a much more slower pace. And I was this is incredible. I love Valencia as well. I've been 2 or 3 times and it's somewhere that I really like.
It's a second city.
It's a second city, yeah.
It's a proper second city.
It is, yeah. Josh, this was an amazing conversation. Thank you so much. And I have one fun question for you before we wrap this up.
I can't wait to answer it.
Where can one find the best pastéis de nata in Porto?
The best pastel de nata, in my opinion, is Castro. It's south of Aliados for people that can take a look at the metro map. So it's south of Aliados, and it's just north of Ribeira. It's on your way down the hill. So if you get off at São Bento Station or Aliados, go south, go downhill, and search out Castro. It's the best. You can watch them prepare it. You can have it warm with a nice little espresso. Tops.
Wow. Yeah. Guys, note it down. I am noted it down for
Castro.
Sure for when I visit Porto. Yeah.
I'll take you. First one's on me.
My man. Josh, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Pleasure's mine.
So guys, I hope you enjoyed that episode. I'll leave the link to Expats Everywhere in the video description on YouTube and in the show notes for the podcasting platform. Remember, if you'd like to support the podcast and support the work that Millennials with Money does, you can do so by signing up as a channel member on YouTube or by becoming a Patreon. And in exchange, you'll get access to exclusive benefits and content as a thank you for your contribution. So with that said, till next time, I'll see you on the next one. And let's get this money.